Good morning, Kelda. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Andy. How are you?
I'm okay. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Again, yes, second time round.
um, so I read your bio, and you've done so many different things, and it's amazing. Climbing Out is such an inspirational organisation, especially for young people who've changed their lives and who've got serious conditions or life-changing conditions or trauma, mental health, etc. It's really really inspiring to to really see what you do, and your hub of operations is fantastic. So,
This is where it
please,
all starts.
please tell me, who is Kelda Wood?
um, yeah. So who is Kelda Wood? That's a really good question. I guess Kelda Wood really is someone who just likes walking a dog and getting out in the hills and being incredibly boring and normal. But I think the journey that I've been on, from my goals from when I was younger, and then my injury, and it's just led me on to do to have some amazing opportunities. But that most importantly then has kind of led me to want to try and motivate and inspire and support other people to go on their journeys, and that's really the absolute passion behind what I do now.
Fantastic. So thinking about how it all started, and so what inspired you, to and perhaps who inspired you?
Yeah, I think there's been some key people in my life that have helped me move forwards. There was a guy called Mark Woods, is a guy called Mark Woods, who he lost his leg to cancer when he was 17, went on to be a Paralympic swimmer, and he fundamentally has kind of supported me when I was struggling and helped me move forwards. And another guy called Martin Hewitt, he was shot out in Afghanistan and set up an organisation called the Adaptive Grand Slam. It was with them that I did Aconcagua. And if they hadn't given me the opportunities that they did, I wouldn't have been able to go on the journey and learn the things that I've learned. But I think I always say, well, this is such a long-winded answer, I know, but I think we have to inspire ourselves as well. We have to want to move forwards, we have to want to make changes, and if we don't, we can't look to other people to give us the answers. So I think other people can give us a push, a shove, a nudge, just the support, but ultimately we have to motivate and inspire ourselves.
That answers my third question, because I've seen you're the first para rower to row 3,000 miles single-handedly, which is amazing. I watched some of the blogs and it's like, really? And it must have been such an experience for you, and to read all the online stories that you every day you were representing a young person about their story, and that's so inspiring. What motivates you and inspires others?
You see, I think when I look at the Atlantic, it was such a two-way thing, because I got so many messages. So I was rowing for a different young person each day. Each young person had been through some kind of mental or physical trauma, and they'd written and shared their own stories. So whoever I was rowing for, we shared their story that day. Now, I was hugely inspired by those stories, because when I was out there and I was starting to whinge and moan about how terrible it was, I kind of then remember the story of who I was rowing for, and kind of say, get a grip, Kelda. You're in the middle of the Atlantic. Okay, it might be tough, but you're ultimately having an incredible experience, and you chose to do this. Some of the young people I was rowing for, whether they'd been through cancer or abuse, or been involved in the Manchester Arena bombing, they had faced way worse than what I was facing out there, and they had no choice. They just had to get through it and keep going. And so that massively inspired me to keep rowing and kind of buck up and get on with it. But then I got so many messages back about how those young people were inspired by what I was doing, because they were saying, you know, I was having a tough day, and then I'd think of you out there, and I would just say, oh, keep going, at least I've got the telly and food and company and a warm bed. And so it was really, really interesting how it was such a two-way thing. And I think that's the great thing with sort of inspiring inspiration, isn't it? You know, it's not
Absolutely.
about putting anyone on a pedestal. It's just about kind of working and supporting together to keep moving forwards.
So, I mean, what would you say was your fondest moment or achievement? Or there must be more than one, especially with climbing out.
Yeah, I mean, they're very different as far as I guess on a personal side of things. You know, for me, the moment that I stepped on the summit of Aconcagua, that was when I found this peace and contentment in my injury, and really accepted who I was with my injury. So that was sort of a profound moment, and when I was actually almost very proud of my attitude, because a lot of people had said I wouldn't be able to do it, and you know, to just dig deep and keep going and believe that I could. You know, the Atlantic was just so tough, and to the point that I asked to quit. And you know, I was a horrible person out there. I mean, I certainly wasn't proud of my behaviour out on the Atlantic. The great thing was there was no one else to see it, so you know, only I will ever know that. But I was very proud of finishing. But you're right, what I'm most proud of more than anything is the impact that the charity's had on so many different lives. And when I see so many young people moving forwards, living life and having the tools to live life as a result of coming on the Climb Out programme, well, hey, you know, that's what's important, isn't it? So
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
So, I mean, you know, thinking about today and where we are with inclusion, why is inclusion so important, especially now?
Do you know, I think this might be a slightly controversial answer, but I think sometimes we have to learn to create inclusion ourselves. Because, you know, my saying was always, and I learned this when I was preparing for Aconcagua, was it's not about saying I can't, it's about saying how can I. So actually climbing Aconcagua with a leg like mine shouldn't really have been possible, but I looked at it and kind of went, how can I? Rowing the Atlantic with a leg like mine really shouldn't have been possible, but I looked at it and said, how can I? So I adapted the boat to make it possible. I got some specially adapted crutches made so I could take my leg out of the equation to make it possible. So yes, I think we all need to be open to, sorry, that's my dog's just saying hello. Do you want me to keep talking, Andy?
No, that's why you carry on. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we you know, it's very important to keep that door open, but we also have to take responsibility ourselves for enabling us to be inclusive. There's a quote I've been given recently, and I love it because I think it really sums things up, and that's you cannot steer a stationary ship. Okay, so what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of the time we can be sitting in our boat, you know, let's relate it back to the Atlantic, you know, and yes, sometimes we need help and support to be able to move, but ultimately it's up to us, to me, to get on those oars and pull. You know, so when I was on the Atlantic, I needed waypoints, I needed someone to give me a weather report, to give me the tools to be able to move, but they couldn't move the boat for me. It was up to me to get on those oars and pull. And that's where I think we all, you know, it sucks when you've had an injury or illness that's left you with physical limitations, but we all have to take an element of responsibility about not letting that be an excuse and creating our own inclusion.
That's good. I mean, thinking about obviously with the schools and colleges, and I work in a specialist college, and we do, we have 300 students with complex disabilities. Uh, Thinking about, obviously what you do, and obviously the mental health, life-changing trauma, illnesses. What would you say to obviously schools who want to be more inclusive and support students who are having a tough time, or coming to school who are in a crisis at the moment? But
Yeah.
obviously, how do we cope with that kind of struggle?
Again, it's such an interesting question. But do you know what? And I'm going to relate this to my own journey, because what I learned was it was actually about managing my mind as much as about managing my injury. And once you actually learn how to manage your mind, it becomes much easier to manage your injury and cope with the impacts of that injury. And so my passion again now is around that whole mental well-being, and the way I describe it is, if mental well-being is like a table, and if you think of your mental health is the tabletop, for that table to work, it needs table legs to hold it up. But I, for one, didn't even know what those table legs were. So for a long time, I struggled with my injury, but actually it was my mental health I was struggling with, because I didn't know the tools to manage my thoughts, which would actually have put my whole injury into perspective. And so when you say about schools and clubs and organisations, I truly, truly believe, and again, this is probably a controversial answer, that if we can give people the mental tools to manage their mental well-being, their minds, actually the rest then becomes much, much easier. And I've seen it happen time and time, and none more so than in the situation we're in at the minute with the coronavirus, and actually the people that are dealing with it and handling the whole lockdown situation the best are the ones that have got the tools to manage their mental well-being. So I'm bound to say that because that's my passion, but that's what I do.
That's fine. I mean, the whole reason of this project was obviously for me when I started it. I mean, I never believed that I get to a point where I've got to nearly 25 interviews now, and it's where did I get these people from? And I'm like, it's actually really inspired me so much, and obviously hopefully it'll inspire more people as well.
Yeah, and do you know what I do want to say is I also truly believe that there's not one size fits all. I'm not saying this is the answer to everybody, and I'm sure other people you've interviewed have given very different answers, and I'm not saying for a second that they're wrong. I just think it's different things work for different people, so we just have to be open to trying different stuff, and then if the table legs and the mind management works for one person, brilliant. For someone else it might be something totally different, and that's all cool. But that's certainly what worked for me, and I think if we just put all of the options out there, then people can choose the table legs that work for them.
I totally agree. I mean, the as I say, the idea of the project is motivation, inspiration, is to support, obviously, and give an outlook of what inspiration people like yourself do, and also find that opinion where we can debate it and say how we move forward in the future. Going on to my next question, regarding these challenging times and motivation, inspiration, what would your message be to the NHS, who are doing a fantastic job? The key workers are doing their another amazing job, the store workers, everybody who's out there working on the front line to support these challenging times, but also the people at home that you work with yourself, who are obviously have anxiety, stress levels are really high, mental health issues. What's your message to those people?
This will end, and the reason why I say that is I have to relate this back to the Atlantic. When I was in the middle of the Atlantic, it felt so overwhelming, it felt so impossible, it felt like it was way too much to cope with. And I think for everyone, whether they're on the front line or whether they're shut at home in lockdown, there's an awful lot of people feeling the same. that, you know, we can't cope, this is overwhelming, the fact that we don't know how long it's going to go on for. You know, there are so many similarities to being stuck out on the Atlantic. But the thing that kept me going was knowing that this will end. You know, it's not going to be forever. It will end. And also, once it does end and you look back on it, it actually seems like such a short period of time, although it feels like it will never end at the minute. You know, I can remember someone saying that to me in the middle of the Atlantic and me going, yeah, right, you know, this feels like it is lasting forever. The second I stepped onto land, I was like, oh my God, that's gone in a flash, you know. And I think when we even look at the last 6 weeks of lockdown, you know, at the start of it, you would have never thought we'd get to 6 weeks, you know. So it's that, you know, it is what it is. Control the controllables. There's nothing we can do about it, but we've just got to keep telling ourselves it will end. You know, and of course, those guys out on the front line doing it, complete admiration and complete respect for what they're doing. And yeah, amazing.
And finally, Kelda, last question. What quote would you use to support motivation and inspiration at these challenging times, and why?
Oh. Well, it's another favourite quote of mine. And this really, so I look at my journey, and, you know, there was a time when I thought it was so unfair. You know, why me? Why me? Why me? And now I've kind of learned that I had to go through all those tough times to learn what I've learned and to enable me to get in the position that I've got. So my favourite quote, and that's kind of the why first, I guess, but there's another why to come at the end of it. But my favourite quote is actually from a guy called David Goggins, and it's doing things that make us uncomfortable help make us strong. The more time we spend uncomfortable, the stronger we'll become. And I think when we're in tough times, which we all are at the minute, I don't think there's anyone who can say they're enjoying this, you know, it's tough, it's hard, you know, we're not trying to deny that, we're not trying to just turn it into a whole load of, think positively and it'll all be fine, like, no, it's tough, but actually we're going to come out of this stronger. And I think for people who cope with lockdown, who cope with being on the front line, it's then when it's finished going, yeah, I learned from it, I coped from it, and how resilient am I and how strong am I? And that's what enables us to grow, you know. So actually, if you're finding it tough, if you're struggling, whether that's through lockdown or whether that's just with life in general or anything else that gets thrown in the future, that's when you're growing, that's when you're getting stronger, that's when you're getting tougher, and that'll take you somewhere if you let it. So that's my favourite quote, and that's why.
Kelda, thank you so much for taking part in my project, and, you know, I really appreciate it. You're such a pleasure to talk to, and, you know, hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. You take care.
You too, Andy.
Cheers. And bye-bye.
Bye.